Now you know what I do, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
we're live.
No.
Yes, we are.
No, Darren, you're a philosopher, and I really want you to think about
I was right last time. I'm right this time. We're live.
Okay, but now you're getting overconfident. You're getting overconfident. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Twitter, right? See, because I got one of these, right? I got an extra one. I got two of them just for this, right? So now what I do is I go to Twitter. Go to Twitter right now. It's not like I don't go there 15,000 times a day. All I have to do is type in T and the whole thing opens up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, it's not here yet. Now I get a little panicky. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh. I'm going to refresh. And I'm so calm, right? I'm a calm person, but I feel anxiety now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press another button. You can't see me on the screen. You can't see everything that's going on over here. I'm like a madman on my computer. Okay, so now I'm going to do one more thing. So you got to have patience. Everybody have patience because I don't know, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. See, I'm right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here like this. And now what I'm going to do, this is my last thing, right? You can't see me. I'm like a madman here. I'm like one of those madmen secretaries from the 1970s and 80s that could type 3,000 words a minute. That's what's going on right over here right now. It's incredible. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to do it one more time. Okay, and hold on. I feel good about this. Hold on. And Nancy, hold on also. Hold on. Nancy's even getting upset with me. She's like, come on now. Okay. And you know what? I'm calm now. Nancy, take it away, please. Nancy takes away the laptop. You know why, Darren? You know why she's taking it away? And you know why she just brought me a cup? We got it down to an art form here. Because we're live. We did it. And now, do you know what I do now? You've done this 4 times. What do I do now?
We celebrate the fact that we're together and we are live.
Yes. And I turn down the music.
Great.
Right? And you like this song. You listened to it for like 10 minutes before this even began. So now what I'm doing is I'm turning down my music and we did it. We did it. This is our 4th. This is our 4th. Did you know that?
I did.
Exciting, isn't it? Exciting.
I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? And it's particularly fun today. You and I had been planning on doing this for months now. And so hold on, I see people's comments. Oh, Mustang Girl is here. Nancy Mustang Girl says hello.
Hey, Mustang Girl.
Mustang Girl joined us on a Periscope we did with Nina Rao, Investor Series 7.5, where we discussed the Hanuman Chalisa. And we actually had Nina do the Hanuman Chalisa. And I was so appreciative that you joined us, and she asked us a really good question too, so I really appreciate it. But today's different. We've been planning this for months. Blake, hold on. You see this? You're going to like this comment. It's funny. Blake Hyman, Adam, your routine makes me laugh. It's great. Yeah, look at that. I'm breaking up. All right. But that's a cool effect. If I could do that deliberately, I would. So, but Darren, we're going to take it away. I'm going to put the screen on you. You and I have been planning this for a couple of months. And what we've been planning for a couple of months, I know I lost the camera. Who cares, right? What we've been planning for a couple of months is that we would start covering Revolver stories. Mm-hmm. Right? So today is our first time doing that, where I really want to devote some minutes to a featured story, right? And then you going into a little bit of depth of what that story really means, because the story is only a few hundred words, but it's so much more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign off for right now. I'll be back in a few minutes. Everything is yours. And if you could just begin with a quick introduction of yourself and a quick introduction of Revolver, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Is that cool?
It's an adventure. Let's do it.
It's going to be fun.
All right, let me know when you're off. It looks like you're off. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Darren Beattie, and many of you know me from Twitter and some other places. Just a brief introduction. Former academic, recovering academic, was a professor at Duke, one of the only, in fact, the only non-tenured full-time academic in the country to have publicly supported then candidate Trump. And that gave me some notoriety at the time. I then moved into the Trump White House, where I was a speechwriter and policy aide to the president. And my latest incarnation is in the media space as the force of Revolver, Revolver.news, which I hope most of you have heard of. And we came out early, we came out strong, still a very new website. So just getting started. So Adam has very graciously invited me to rant on about one of the latest pieces that we've had, just published, very fresh, mint, right off the press here, about an hour ago. But it's on a theme that Revolver, I think, has paid special attention to. And I think this is very important, particularly on the right. And the theme is the following. Quite simply, large swaths of our own national security apparatus here in the United States have been repurposed, redeployed domestically in order to silence, suppress, and destroy the energies associated, for instance, with Donald Trump, but not limited to Trump. At this point, it's basically anyone who dares to deviate from a quote-unquote expert consensus on any matter is engaging in dangerous disinformation and is effectively labeled a de facto domestic terrorist by our own government. It is a terrifying, shocking, and horrific development, and Revolver.news has been at the forefront of covering this, particularly for those on the right and in the broader conservative space. So you can see this story that's new from Revolver. Go to Revolver.news, which you should be doing on a daily basis anyway, if you want to stay informed. The piece is "The Deep State Just Made Its Declaration of War Against MAGA Official." Now, what is this? What is this declaration of war? Well, it's a who's who list of deep state rogue, really war criminals, really the worst filth, the worst kind of trash, representing the most corrupt, decrepit, evil, and I would say illegitimate regime that we've seen in a long time. And that's what I've dubbed the globalist American empire. If you've seen that on Twitter, that's where it comes from. The coinage is the globalist American empire. We're not America anymore. We're the globalist American empire. And so this who's who, this rogues gallery of pure filth, pure trash, pure evil, had gotten together and signed a letter. And the letter basically says, what we need to do is we need to treat the events of January 6th as a kind of political 9/11 and launch a 9/11-like commission in order to study these events and to study the environment leading up to these events. And this, of course, includes, quote, coordinated disinformation campaigns. More on disinformation later. Non-transparent financing of extremist networks, potential foreign influences, and of course, quote-unquote, white supremacist violent extremism, which the Department of Homeland Security, yes, the vast, incompetent, really low-ranked bureaucracy that was created in the aftermath of 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security has now, on October 2020, identified the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland as none other than white supremacist violent extremism. And in case you need that concept translated, they basically mean you. They mean you And if you voted for Trump, 74 million people like you. And if you didn't vote for Trump, but you just have some grievances and disagreements with the open air dystopian prison that the globalist American empire has become, they mean you too. You're white supremacists. In fact, you don't even have to be white to be a white supremacist, which is quite an interesting development. And so the purpose of this letter is for all of these former national security officials basically to make obvious and explicit what we've all kind of sensed for a while now, which is that all of the dominant institutions of our national security apparatus are now repurposed against us. It's a domestic war. It's a domestic war on terror, and you are the domestic terrorist. And so this alone is quite troubling, quite shocking, and quite despicable. But in this Revolver piece, revolver.news, we go on to present a little biographical detail on some of this scum who signed their name to this letter, just to give you a sense of these people who are marshaling the full weight and force of the globalist American empire's national security state against you, the people who have arrogated to themselves the moral authority to turn the United States into something like China and maybe even worse. So the first great guy, James Clapper. I think we've heard of him. Okay. What kind of guy is this? Well, he's deep state hack. He's a perjurer. He's a liar. He should be in prison. He committed open perjury before a Senate Intelligence Committee when asked whether the NSA collected bulk data, surveillance data against ordinary Americans. He lied. He lied about horrible development that the United States has become a surveillance state. Just like China, just like these autocracies that we point our fingers at. That's what we become. And we become that through the assistance, through the lies of James Clapper. Who's the next one? This next guy, Michael McFowle. He's actually on Twitter. And I'm hesitant to even talk about him because he's so low. He's so low born. He is such a, and I don't say this in the way people interpret it, but he is such a cognitive peasant, such a low-born cognitive peasant who was just the ruling class just reached down and plucked him out of his low beginnings. In exchange, he had to have a deal with the devil. Now he basically, is a complete, I don't want to say prostitute, I don't want to say whore, word like that, but he's definitely in the service of the deep state regime. But he's one of the, he's a cognitive lightweight, let's put it that way. And it's very clear from his interactions with other people in the intelligence community, it's very clear what the hierarchy is. And he's looked down upon by more serious heavyweight types in the intelligence sector. He's more of the, he brings the coffee, so to speak, metaphorically. He's the coffee guy. And they call him Michael McFowle. But what's his deal? Okay, so he was Barack Obama's ambassador to Russia. And he's a big proponent of a little concept that if you've been following revolver.news in the past several months, one thing that really put us on the map at Revolver is bringing this concept of color revolution to the public's attention. I know many, people, not saying we're the only people that knew about this concept, but really in the context of American politics as a kind of household term, I do think Revolver played a huge role in presenting this idea to the public. And Michael McFowle is, he's on the color revolution grift. And as I pointed out on Tucker and other places, what the color revolution is, it's a regime change model favored by certain networks in our security apparatus. Michael McFowle is part of that apparatus, albeit very low on the hierarchy due to his limited intelligence and his embarrassingly low birth. So, and his lackluster education, I shouldn't forget that. So Michael McFowle signed this letter, and in the wake, by the way, of Revolver News's color revolution piece, the timing here is quite interesting. Michael McFowle said, autocrats have demonized the phrase color revolution, and revolution generally has a negative connotation for many. Instead, I use the term, quote unquote, democratic breakthroughs. And at the time, we were in the midst of all these riots based on a false narrative of George Floyd, which is an entirely different story. But I'd like to say that, yeah, by democratic breakthroughs, he means, a rock going through a store's window in these riots. Okay, so he literally wrote a book on color revolutions. He spent years trying to foment democratic breakthroughs here in the US. He more or less got his way with how the events played out in the past election. And he has a deleted tweet that gives you a sense of his true feelings and allegiances. He says, Trump has lost the intelligence community, has lost the State Department. He has lost the military. How can he continue to serve as our commander-in-chief? Well, that's an interesting question, McFowle. Thank you for elucidating to us the fact that the intelligence community, the State Department, and now even the military have become completely corrupt, co-opted, and weaponized against the American people. They have nothing to do with keeping us safe. They have everything to do with keeping control over us on behalf of the criminal filth that run the country. Thank you for that, Michael. So enough about him. Next, we have Michael Hayden, who's an interesting character. He's one of the most proficient, I would say, deep state shills. As much contempt as I have for him, he is definitely several cuts above intellectually Michael McFowle. He has enjoyed the services of McFowle for a long time. He is very happy that McFowle has perfected the type of coffee that he likes delivered to him, so he can at least give McFowle credit for that. But Michael Hayden is one of the most glib and pernicious of the deep state shills, and he's been active on Twitter recently. He's a habitual liar, and not small lies, big and portentous lies. He lied about wiretapping. He lied about a whole host of things. He lied about spying. In fact, he's such a liar on such big things that even the Columbia Journalism Review has made a point to say, look, this guy is completely misleading and a liar. Quick story. I had a lunch with him at one point, and this was after he had served out his tenure, both as the head of the NSA and the CIA. It was a very small lunch, and this was before I was maybe as controversial as I've become. So it was more kind of respectable, established people. And we were all having a little chat. And the issue of immigration came up. And I wasn't as controversial as I am now, and wasn't as perhaps enlightened as I am now, but I knew enough to ask him a question about immigration and said, look, it's great, all the stuff that you're doing, but don't you think there's at least a trade-off? Would you at least concede that there's a trade-off between our relatively lax immigration policies from terror-ridden countries and the problem that we have of domestic terror in this country? And when you concede that whichever side one falls on, there is a trade-off in the sense that the more lax we are about immigration, the more domestic terror that we can expect, the more terror we can expect. And he just completely laughed in my face. That's not an exaggeration. He laughed in my face, and the discussion moved on. But it really just hit home at that time, like, this is a hell of a way for our national security apparatus to operate. Because the only acceptable response to terror attacks were enhancing this Orwellian surveillance state powers here at home, or giving or expanding our foreign policy adventurism overseas. The third option of simply controlling terrorism by restricting migration, which would, compared to the alternative, seem to be the most ethical option and probably the most effective option, but unfortunately the option that doesn't fill the coffers of our national security industry. That was not only out of the question, it was literally laughable. ludicrous. So that's Michael Hayden. Another signatory, Alexander Vidman, just need to look at him. Yeah, I'm not going to say he looks like a transsexual, but he definitely seems to have endocrine issues, apart from other issues that he has. Yeah, just a really duplicitous type character. And again, part of this Atlanticist network, obsessed with Russia, obsessed with the Ukraine, obsessed with energy politics, something I can talk about a different time. And, very much involved in the impeachment operation against Trump. He worked for Trump, and this gives you a sense of the kind of filth that actually worked for Trump. There are a lot of people like that. Vindman was more of a rule rather than the exception, particularly in the kind of national security category. And so he thought that he could run for Ukraine policy better than Trump. And the price of that was that Trump, of course, had to be impeached. This guy, these are the people that they present as part of a bipartisan and disinterested collection of national security professionals. Total joke. Another guy, Zach Wamp. We'll skip him. He's irrelevant. Another guy, Chris Shays. Okay, he's someone that I hadn't heard of, but came up in the course of research. Connecticut congressman. Now, this Connecticut congressman, Chris Shays, is very concerned about the danger of violent insurrectionists. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Going back in his history, he's actually defended the American soldiers who were implicated in the whole Abu Ghraib torture issue, which is interesting. And in fact, if you've been following Revolver News or other places, you see our really hard-hitting coverage of the Abu Ghraib-like abuses that have been visited on these political prisoners who have been rounded up because of their alleged participation in January 6th Capitol protests. Really disgusting stuff and quite out of the Abu Ghraib playbook. So you have this Chris Shays who he defends the soldiers in Abu Ghraib. And okay, maybe he was just overcome by patriotism. Maybe he was eating too many freedom fries, and maybe that was just another time, and we can excuse him for that. Well, let's look what let's get a sense of the moral universe that Chris Shays inhabits. So he defends Speaker Dennis Hastert. Oh, that's interesting. So those who don't know, Dennis Hastert, huge pedophile, boy molesting, sex scandal into the boys wrestling team and all this, everything that you would expect from that. Everything you'd expect from a Republican politician with a long history in a boys wrestling team. That's pretty much what you got from Dennis Hastert. God knows how many intelligence agencies knew about this years, decades before the American people did. And of course, our reliable voice of moral authority, Chris Shays, who wants to weaponize the national security apparatus against, grandmas who might believe in QAnon, who rearrange the furniture at the Capitol, something like that. He's of course he defends Dennis Hastert. So he'll sooner defend the pedophile Dennis Hastert, the sex offender Dennis Hastert. He'll sooner defend them than he will, the MAGA moms who were, yelling too loud by the Capitol on the 6th. And of course, he also defended Mark Foley, par for the course. Total scum. Basically, this list of people is a who's who gallery of why America is not America anymore, why it's the globalist American empire, why we're in deep trouble, why we have no moral authority, and why every single American needs to take heed that these institutions are no longer legitimate. These institutions have declared war on you. And Revolver.news will continue to be at the forefront of covering this disturbing development. And I think a lot of people, especially on the right, they get so caught up in these buzzwords, these familiar categories like the socialists, the Democrats, the this and that. You need to understand that it's much bigger than that. At this point, the national security apparatus itself, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the DOD now, the military itself, they're all being ideologically cleansed, all being weaponized against you, the American people. So it's a very disturbing thing, and we're going to keep covering it. So I hope you go check out the story in full. I hope you enjoyed this comprehensive review of the story, and I hope you'll keep checking Revolver. And if you like our absolutely cutting-edge investigative work, I invite you to give us some support so we can keep doing what we're doing and do it better and more, and continue to shape the narratives that really define the political battle space in this country.
That's awesome, Darren. And I listened to the whole thing. So is Nancy, and both of us were like, oh, wow, right?
Yeah.
Because
that was all completely off the cuff. I didn't know I was going to have to do that.
I know. And tell us how you really feel. Like you were holding back a little bit. I really appreciate that. And I know we wanted to keep today kind of short because what we're doing, and I hope everybody appreciates this, is we're trying something new, right? We're trying to kind of deliver some of the Revolver message in a different way, which is there's some really good stories, right? There's the January 6th. I call it an insurrection in name only, right? Mm-hmm. Darren, I'm giving that to you. I'm giving that to you.
I love it.
It's good. Yes. And if you are in the tech world or in the venture capital world, we might even call it insurrection as a service, because that's a thing within that's like our jargon. But so, right before this, I was thinking, and I know I shared a little bit of it with you, what would Andrew Breitbart be doing today, right? And I don't want to, speculate too much because, who knows, right? He could have been one of those people signing that letter with Michael Hayden and the rest of them. But what would Breitbart be doing today? What stories would he be writing? I think it would be different than the current incarnation of the masthead, right? I'm a big fan of some of the people who are writers there, and they've done some great jobs, particularly on social media, on how social media has been this kind of a corrosive influence within politics and our social fabric. But I don't think it would look like that. I've listened to a lot of his conversations, the ones, that are available on YouTube, and I've, read so much about him. And I think on C-SPAN also, but there was a really good conversation with him. And he just seemed as though he wanted to go beyond kind of the veneer.
Yes.
And when I think of Revolver, I see that that's clearly the direction. And I'm so appreciative that they've got somebody kind of with the intellectual weight that you have. I think that means so much to Revolver now and where it's going.
Right. Well, everything is different, and everything's going to be an expression of the people involved. And, Revolver has truly a world-class team. I'm the one who's the front face presenting, but we have really talent that's second to none, and a good collection of different types of personalities and such. But I like to think, we have, great antecedents, great sort of precursors. Andrew Breitbart is certainly an example. And, when we first came out, the motto was sort of the new drudge. And, we do have great aggregation, take aggregation very seriously. If you go there once a day, multiple times a day, you will be informed as to the news of that day, and hopefully in a way that you find entertaining. But it's not just drudge. It's not just an aggregation. So I like to think it's sort of the best version of a drudge. It is like Breitbart, at least in the sense that we have our own pieces, and it's a different style. We operate within different parameters of Breitbart. I think we actually have a wider scope of a wider range in terms of the kinds of things that we can cover that Breitbart had even in its heyday. It was more boxed in terms of the parameters, but its style was certainly much more combative. Its style was combative, and it understood the importance of research and news pieces, and we do share that inclination. And And there's another side to Revolver that I think is also great, and a space that's just totally empty on the right that I think we're doing quite a good job in filling. And as we build out our investigative apparatus, we have world-class people on the team, but to build out the team, this will be even more so. But really an investigative team to address this issue that I was, ranting on earlier, of the threat of the national security state. And it's something that I think is particularly difficult, or it's tricky to translate into a vocabulary that's digestible to people on the right, because again, I think people on the right are, for various reasons, more resistant to institutional type critiques. There is this sense of the people on the right want to venerate just institutions of authority. And so now when our institutions of authority, like, FBI, DOJ, and so forth, have become corrupt, it's a different it's a different thing. It's a delicate thing to translate that into terms that people can accept, because we want to be patriotic. We want to love our institutions. We want to support our institutions. But guess what? Our institutions have been corrupt, weaponized, and they've now effectively declared war on everyone. So Revolver.news, I think, is at the forefront of that effort, to the extent that there's a dimension of it that you could even call like a right-wing gray zone, if people are familiar with the gray zone. So it's a right-wing type of gray zone, right-wing type of, those kinds of left-wing national security critic sites, like even like the Intercept, although I know the Intercept has kind of gone down since Greenwald left, but in that vein.
Yeah. I'm aligned with the way you express it. I think about it a little bit differently, and I'll tell you, because I used to regularly read Bird, right? And I'm not particularly radical or even conservative. I'm a liberal New York City guy. But they did have interesting stories, particularly, they were covering Hillary's emails, which was just like such a slap, right? Because we knew what was going on, and they were doing a really good job. And it was only them and Daily Caller and Chuck Ross that were doing that, and they were doing a really good job of it. But I think that now they're a bit constrained, that their customer base wants to hear everyone called a socialist, right?
Exactly.
And they're kind of stuck within that now. So I like the curation, that you guys have done. And just so everyone knows, I'm a subscriber, and I didn't want this to turn into a pitch because I don't want to get lost in that conversation. But I'm very interested in what people think of Revolver. And if people have gone there, I'm also particularly interested in it. It's a startup, and it's something I've told Jack Posobiec. It's something I've told everybody. I always support the startups. I've done it all my life because I know how hard it is when you're starting something to even kind of get out of bed, right? You're always asking yourself, and even though you're excited to get to work, because I'm a workaholic, they'd have to tear me out.
Mm-hmm.
But you're always having to remind yourself, that conversation with yourself, that you need to do this, and that it has a greater importance than just making a payday. So I really appreciate that. So there's a couple of questions that I want to get to, because I think they're really interesting questions. And this one, which isn't the question I want to get to, but it is. So first we're going to cover this, and then we're going to go into the Revolver story a little bit more. So Gray Brain 0 or O, right? And I like that image that you chose, and I like the background you used. So the GAE, and help me understand what that is.
The GAE is the acronym for the Globalist American Empire.
Okay.
Formerly known as America.
Yeah, we've definitely changed. And it's irrevocable, I think. But so the GAE going after DeSantis, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Gates now, trying to purge MAGA. So when you look at this, now that you're kind of an academic and now you're kind of doing what you do, so you get to see the world in kind of, in its complexities and its intricacies. Do you see them really going after Gates? Do you see kind of an orchestration going on?
Absolutely. No, they're going after anyone who was in any proximity to the MAGA movement. They went after Steve Bannon, went after Roger Stone, they're going after Matt Gaetz, DeSantis, you name it. Anyone who's played a role in advancing this movement. is a target of our national security apparatus, and that's just the way it is.
And there's another question. Now, here goes into your story a bit, which I think is very interesting, because Patriot Act 2, right, 2 plus, right, 2.0 or whatever kind of the number they're going to get to is it is obviously it's an Afghanistan war turned inwards, right? Everybody kind of knows, can see that. But at the same time, it can't really just be directed towards white people, because it's where a lot of the capital, right? And it's a lot where the money is held, is within kind of a that certain kind of population base, I suppose. I don't know. I don't have the right language for it, but you know what I mean. Everybody knows what I mean. So it's very difficult, because those people have lawyers, right? They have the resources to be able to challenge these things, and they can also kind of choose domiciles, right? Where they can kind of pick and choose what municipality and what legal system might better assist them, statewide. So there's a question here which I think is really interesting, and it's also a commentary. Hey, right? Which is acceptable in Scrabble, by the way. Says multiracial whiteness. They call it for Enrique Otero. I don't know who Enrique Otero is, so let me repeat the question or the comment. Multiracial whiteness. They've called it for Enrique Otero. Do you see that? Just in what you're seeing now, when you're looking at all these stories to curate and kind of get the narrative together, do you see that? Have you heard that term, multiracial whiteness? And there's another way of saying it also, multi-ethnic something, but it seems to me that they're not going after the white people because they're already white, but they're going after the minorities and other I guess they call it POCs now, which is kind of a vulgar term in itself, but they're going after those people, the multiracial whiteness people. Have you seen that at all? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I haven't heard the particular term multiracial whiteness, but I know its function from similar things. In fact, there was a recent event, I forget what exactly it was, but there was an African American suspect in some crime, and the description that the news media gave him is he has dark white skin.
Really?
which is quite something. I'll tweet it and I'll tag you on it. I just forget exactly what context it's from. It harkens back to, if anyone remembers now, the case of Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. They called him a white Hispanic. And now, of course, even people who would usually be considered not white can have been kind of enveloped into the broader category of whiteness in order to express the fact that they're bad. And so I think in one sense, this does show that it's not, it's of course not simply and only an attack on white people. And of course, like a lot of the Antifa people are white and so forth. So it's not simply and only a racial thing in that respect. And a lot of people who are non-white who dislike the very same kind of dystopian developments that we've been talking about, they could also be criticized as sort of supporting whiteness or complicit in whiteness or whatever. But I do think, again, I think there's this real discomfort among white people to recognize that it is also a racial attack, because to recognize it as a racial attack is to invite the thought that maybe white people should think of themselves as a category to defend, which is, of course, the most forbidden thought in the United States of America. And I think white people are deeply uncomfortable with that thought. And so they want to make it, it's not just about white people. But the fact is, it's using a racial term. The dominant institutions of this country have used a racial term, whiteness, a color term, to demonize people, to the point that whiteness in this vernacular is associated with anything bad. And young white people are taught to hate themselves and so forth. And I think if it were happening to any other category of people, if if we saw language in China, for instance, directed at Uyghurs, if we saw language directed at Uyghurs in China and just swapped out the way that whiteness is talked about in the United States, our national security officials would perhaps rightly categorize this as quasi-genocidal language. And that's a fact. And we can't really, it's a troubling fact. And I think people are very uncomfortable about it. You can get in big trouble for pursuing that rabbit hole too aggressively, but it's simply a reality. And, depending how afflicted one is with this disease of not being able to dissimulate when perhaps it's for one's own good, simply has to acknowledge it.
So we're going to go on because we promised to keep it short.
Yep.
You and I can go on because but first I want to say hello to somebody. So Almost Jingo has joined us. And Darren, do you know Rosie? Now you do. Rosie is awesome, and every time I think of Rosie, and I nag her, I really do nag her, so I'm so appreciative of her. I also think of when we were DMing, and Rosie will remember this, when we were DMing about the last episode of, what's that show called, with the dragons? Game of Thrones. Right? And Rosie had not yet seen it, and I think they had said, don't tell me what it is. I think they were going to go visit a friend. They were like a day behind. So hopefully Rosie can enjoy that recollection, because I have a good memory. And then Rosie also says something that you can't respond to, but I'll let you shake your head one way or the other, because Darren, and I know we can't respond to this, so I want to be fair. I controversial is fun, but you can't be controversial if we all lose our platform, right? So Almost Jingo says, Darren, be honest, do you think Sicknick was killed? What's happening with that story? It's only been you and Kelly. It's only been you and Julie Kelly.
Look, it's a very bizarre story. Revolver, again, I'm very proud that our investigative team, world class, has been at the forefront of this. And we've had a series of pieces that have come out. And I think it would be premature at this point to say, if he was killed or by whom. If he was, it's just premature to say. What we can say is there are very serious questions that the authorities simply haven't answered. And one of the basic ones is, why haven't they released official autopsy report? And if you look at the actual videos, one of our latest, extremely detailed, it takes so much time and effort to do these things, and nobody else is doing them, extremely detailed comparative image analysis based on a recent video that the New York Times released that was supposed to be this bombshell smoking gun video showing how Sicknick was just overcome by bear spray. And we do this painstaking comparative image analysis, and suffice it to say, it raises some real disturbing questions that have not yet been answered. And so, it's a very serious issue. It's one of those things that we're taking it so seriously and covering it so seriously that it's premature to say this happened, this didn't happen. We're covering it in excruciating detail, and we're presenting the questions, in many cases, very troubling questions that in any serious type of society, in any serious investigation, the authorities would have answered by now. And so we have a follow-up piece in the works that's going to be huge, probably come out next week. And so that's basically what I have to say about the Sicknick case as it stands now.
And Rosie, I scrolled down a little bit, which I enjoy doing, right? So I enjoy kind of seeing the questions and people interacting with each other. And so they're going to pop up again in just a moment because they have another interesting comment. So Jesse Matchy, thank you so much for being here. And although I haven't served, I do have family that served. And unfortunately, I've lost them all in my life. So their bodies are no longer with us, including Nancy's father. So Jesse Matchy, thank you so much for your service and thank you for joining us. Says, Darren, there are some of us veterans that have seen all of this. Thank you for speaking out. And I'm going to add to that.
Thank you.
Before you can respond to that, right? Or you can't respond to it. But have you heard this from other people? I mean, you must be getting a lot of texts and a lot of emails and DMs and a lot of signals, because there's not many people that are willing to kind of publicly state and emphatically state that this is really an assault. That's
oh, absolutely. Look, if this is aggravating to me as a civilian, one could only imagine how aggravating these developments are to service members who are patriots themselves, who subscribe to institutions and whose corruption they have to not only see but abide by firsthand. It's a terrible thing, and it's something. It has terrible consequences, and so I thank Jesse here for everything he's done, and that's partly why we're going to continue to cover this, because people like him and people those like him, they deserve better institutions, especially people serving in the military. They deserve a serious military, not a military that's worried about the latest transgender fad.
And so I'll tell you, and there's another comment, then we're going to start closing up, is that Nancy's father was a World War II vet. And if it wasn't for the VA and the assistance that they gave him, and I think they also gave him job training when he came home, didn't he?
I remember.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the VA in his closing years with us, it would have been kind of horrible. So there was also a generation that really appreciated kind of the contribution of people, and now they don't.
I remember he lost a lot of hearing.
And he also lost a lot of hearing in the war. So Nancy also cites that. So and then we're going to start closing up because there's a lot of things here, and I want to be responsive to them quickly. So Knight, this is a great. This medium is great for Revolver. I agree. I'm smart, but I much prefer audiobooks to reading.
Many such cases, as they say. So that's great. We should do it more often.
I go to sleep either reading books or listening to my audiobooks, and I am now listening to, what is it, Xenophon? I think I'm up to Xenophon now, and it's hypnotic. So I just went through the audiobook of Republic, and it is a different type of thing when you listen to it well acted. And you read it, there's a little bit of nuance that you can also get in that form. And so Rosie again is here, and I wanted to get your understanding on this. It's full circle. Durham found no wrongdoing by the CAA in the torture debacle. I mean, do you think that these things are now we are now kind of getting the downstream consequences of what was happening earlier and decisions that were made earlier?
I mean, sure. I mean, the national security apparatus has been, it's become a behemoth, and really the post 9/11 era was an inflection point. And as I point out in the Revolver.news piece on the rogues gallery of war criminal trash who basically signed this declaration of war on the American people, the DHS, which hierarchically is probably the lowest prestige of all of these institutions, but the DHS was created in the aftermath of 9/11, and now that whole grift and scam of the war on terror has kind of run its course, really the national security apparatus has two additional grifts. They have two excuses for their insanely inflated budgets. One is something we maybe talk about in another stream, and that is this neo-Cold War with China that everyone's kind of pushing for. There's some justification, and in other cases maybe not so much. And then apart from this neo-Cold War with China, it's the domestic war, the war on terror 2.0 directed against American citizens. And it's going to be, just as dumb, just as dysfunctional, just as unethical as the first one, but on steroids. And instead of some mythical, the Islamic extremist terrorist, now the domestic terrorist is going to be, you. It's going to be me. It's going to be basically all of us. And that's
we're gonna
what we look forward to in the 21st century in the globalist American empire.
Yeah. And we're going to go on just because I want to get to the last questions, and then we got to go because we promised ourselves it was only going to be 20 minutes, and here we are because there's really interesting things here. So, Rachel Kovifi, which is, and I like that picture that you shared. That's a very nice picture, right? Is that a racing outfit that they both got? And it seems like the racing outfit has a pack of M&Ms, and I love M&Ms. I'm going to be eating some, so I got a pack here someplace, but not the peanut ones. Not the peanut ones. No peanut ones. So says, I have Revolver saved to my phone home screen. Great site. It is a great site. I go to very few websites. I think a lot of people know that I try and stay emotionally disengaged from news, right? So I curate very, very carefully. And I'm very disciplined with what I let into my head, because I know once something is in my head, how difficult it is to kind of take it out. So if it's bad information or it's not helpful, it's extraordinarily difficult to kind of rip it out. It's almost like a SEAL team operation to take bad information. So on Twitter, I get notifications from you, Jack, Rising Serpent,
Yeah.
Rosie, Election Wizard, Columbia Bugle, because I feel that they're kind of taking risks by sharing stuff that a lot of other people, conservatives, can't do, right? And they're really cool with it. Robert Barnes, so I go to Revolver, and it's how I kind of curate my feed. That's all, because after that, I don't really care too much about the world outside of my business and my professional type of things. Yep. So here's a crazy question for you. Then we're going to go on, because I talked all through that. Is how many people visit you through telephone, through smartphone versus desktop, and what device are they using?
Yep, it's about, it varies from month to month, but it's generally 65% mobile, and the rest desktop, and maybe a sliver on tablet, but negligible.
Yeah, interesting. I get it via phone as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and then we're going to start closing up. So I'm going to look at some of the last questions. So VJ Neck, and they've got that Bart Simpson type of thing, but do you know what they're writing? Do you know what that's on the chalkboard?
I can't make it out.
Okay.
Visit revolver.news.
Yeah, I know, that'd be funny. So we are in the looting and humiliation stage of our republic. So from your Hellenic studies, does this remind you of kind of Coursera at all? Do you kind of feel that this is the elites having moved to Ravana, or them letting everyone kill each other in Coursera? Do you feel like this is somewhat of a replay and that we're just going to continue a slide?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm hesitant to make these kinds of historical comparisons, because I think, I think history is very interesting, and it can be insightful in this sense. But I also think that, for the more people read history, the more they kind of want to justify the time put in by kind of, forcing these types of comparisons, and they're fine so long as they kind of elucidate something that isn't there. But previous in history, a lot of societies have collapsed and empires have collapsed, and there have been cases of the emerging power and the dominant power, and and such. But and that's important, but I kind of gravitate more to the novelty of this special type of dystopia that has emerged in the globalist American empire. And it's really the novelty of it, the newness of type, I think, that I find most fascinating and also disgusting.
We're going to move on to, because I see some good questions, but I know we got to go, but I see some really good questions. It's kind of like when you don't want to wave goodbye to people, but you got to, and it's like emotional. So
there will be more. So
yeah, we're going to start doing this more regularly, and we're going to have it more rigidly. But I want to get everybody's feedback as we're going to start closing up. I want to get everybody's feedback on Revolver. on if you've gone to Revolver, if you subscribe to Revolver. I do. I bought Jack's book. Jack knows that. I think I was like one of the early buyers. I think it was. I don't recall if it's available yet, but whatever. I know that I'm on kind of that list. I saw Host. It is when it was controversial. Yep. And I went there. I engaged with everybody. Yeah, Mike's last interview with Jack Murphy was incredible. By the way, everyone should watch that.
I haven't seen it yet, but I will.
It's unbelievable. But I do want to get everybody's comments on if they've gone to Revolver, what their take on is it. How frequently do they go to Revolver? And do they like the headlines? Do they like the fonts? Do they like kind of the texture of the thing? Is that something that they feel comfortable with? And would they also become a subscriber, right? We have to support the startups. We're all in life. We're all starting up. And it's the same thing. I've lost a lot of weight. A lot of people know I went from fat to lean, right? I'm in really good shape. But people supported me along the way because you're so fragile when you're trying to lose weight. You're just emotionally vulnerable. It's a startup. I literally called it the startup of me. When I lost weight and when I wrote up about it, I called it the startup of me. And there were so many people that tried to bring me down, but there were also so many people that tried to help boost me. And now to this day, I encourage people when I hear that they're losing weight, I just tell them keep going. I don't give them any advice on doing this or that. I say you look fantastic. If it's a new mother and she seems stressed, I might say, hopefully you're enjoying the time with your baby. And, you just know what to say because you know when people are vulnerable. So I like, if people can, if their discretionary income permits it, to become a subscriber to Revolver. It's our way of kind of giving back. And remember, if the business model has changed a lot because back then advertisers, weren't becoming terrorized, right? And now Revolver is up against everything, right? So, I had a conversation offline, DM with Sundance, right? Sundance. And I said, let's do a Periscope and we can figure it out. He said, Adam, they would get me, right? They're looking to get me. He's on the hit list. You're on the hit list also, right? We know that you're on the hit list. So the Breeper model wouldn't work for you. You can't go out and get Coca-Cola as an advertiser, whoever, as an advertiser. It doesn't work for you. You can't do commercials. You can't get thousands of people kind of spreading the evangelism on the street saying, read Breebirdie's doing this and doing that. You can't go on the YouTube shows. You can't, the distribution mechanism has changed for you. So I'd like everybody to subscribe just so they can also get rid of the ads. Think about it that way. But it really is giving back. Darren's doing a lot for us. He truly is. And without Revolver, we'd be in kind of a sad shape. So there's a couple of questions and then we're going to start closing out. I don't know what this is. I'm really fascinated. Knight says, wasn't there some story that Enrico Taro was an FBI informant? True or not? Who's Enrico Taro?
Yeah, this, I'm not sure if that name is exactly accurate, but it's referring to one of the leaders of the Proud Boys. And I believe it has been confirmed that he was an informant for the authorities. And I think that is an interesting thread that Revolver will pursue in great depth and with comprehensiveness. The extent to which these groups, these organizations associated with the 1/6 event, the profound infiltration that they experienced by various authorities, which is a hallmark of many such events, going all the way back, even going back to the first World Trade Center bombing, the participation, the active participation of informants, undercover agents, and the extent to which infiltration of this sort plays a role in such events is a very important dimension of this. I call it the counter-American intelligence operation being run by those in our national security apparatus, and this narrative demonizing regular American people as de facto or as suspected domestic terrorists. So the role of infiltration in these groups is very important. It's very disturbing, and we intend to cover it in great detail in the coming weeks and months.
We're going to go on. I got to look like this. I'm not covered up. So Rick Butterfield, I'm going to respond to this one really quickly. Adam still likes the old paradigms. Hold on, look at that. Adam still likes the old paradigms of left wing, right wing. That paradigm is outdated. It's not so much about left wing liberal versus right wing conservative. It's now more versus less freedom. And I'm going to disagree with Rick, and I appreciate that thought, but I want to clarify my own position because I think it's very interesting. I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm a New York Democrat. I'm fine with that, right? And it is what it is, right? But at the same time, I disagree that I'm not part of the old political paradigm. And one of the things I'm so impressed with the Bitcoin kids is I wouldn't even call them libertarians. These kids are smart. I would say they're anarchist libertarians. And one of the things I think is remarkable about them is that they have no allegiance to anything. They say America's crumbling, they're killing the dollar, and we have to restore our own sovereignty because they're not going to give us back our sovereignty. And while I go into the last two questions, Darren, and I know it came up a little bit, but I can't find that thing. Can you talk about what we talked about last time really quickly? Have you figured out a way to kind of quickly, succinctly kind of express how you described it as kind of taboo shopping or taboo arbitrage?
Yep. Concept of taboo arbitrage, very simply, there was a question earlier about brain drain and from America. And I think one interesting instance of potential taboo arbitrage would be, imagine if premier research universities in China were to endow tenured chairs for some of the most prominent canceled American academic dissidents. Something simple like that, because there are a lot of things that you can't say, you can't talk about as an academic. Perhaps you couldn't even research in the context of American university system. And China could leverage that by endowing a chair and saying, look, this professor is canceled. Look, this avenue of research is not promoted or encouraged in the United States because of their ideological restrictions. Come over here to China. Now, of course, China isn't a free society. They have their own taboos that are viciously enforced. But the whole concept of taboo arbitrage is that they're not the same taboos. And so I think a lot of Americans might, if given the option, trade the taboos in China, namely not being allowed to talk about Xi or CCP or whatever, to being allowed to talk about a wide range of things that are permissible in China that aren't here. Just like a lot of Chinese would come to the United States and take the other end of that bargain. And so this general idea of taboo arbitrage is made possible, increasingly viable by this emerging multipolarity within our international system. And so I think recognizing the opportunities that emerge from multipolarity is something that is important, and it's kind of, I think, maybe one of the most exciting outside of the box dimensions to this whole kind of political arena and how it's evolving.
So here's a question for you, and I've had this conversation with Paul Gottfried also, and with other people. My son, back when he was not wise with his academic future in terms of teaching, right? He wanted to become a professor, and his studies were post-German Renaissance. Is that what it was? Post-German Enlightenment, post-German, pre- and post-German Enlightenment, and also Jewish philosophy. And then he got wise, and I spoke to Paul Gottfried, and he said, our son did the right thing, because it's horrible what's happened. So here's a question from B. Moon. The brain drain is partially a result of the decline, failure in education, and focus on that which doesn't require critical thought. And now the climaxing of postmodernism, wonder twinning. So here's my, with CT, I don't know what CT is, but here's my question. Do you think the academics that you know are going to find homes in China and these countries where they can kind of shop taboos? Because China does want Western philosophy. They just don't want woke. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right. No, as far as my own immediate network, I know some people have done this, but I think this is at such an early stage that I think you're going to see more and more of this, say, in the course of the next decade. So my experience in academia, I have a short-lived academic career, thank God. But the time that I entered academia, it still seemed like a viable professional endeavor. And I've kind of talked about this a little bit before, is that my understanding of the trade-off involved. So my undergraduate degree was in mathematics, and I wanted to pursue a research agenda of kind of the intersection of philosophy of mathematics and kind of the history of political theory and so forth. And that's what's reflected in my dissertation. And we can, talk about that another time. But my understanding of the trade-off involved in going into academia was that, and my grandfather was an academic. I have many academics in my family. My understanding of the trade-offs was that, okay, you can be a very smart, eccentric person, and academia is a place where you can go to study really interesting, really important in the kind of philosophical sense, and supremely unapologetically impractical ideas. This is the place that will tolerate your eccentricity, tolerate and even celebrate your exploration of really interesting, important, but impractical ideas. And the trade-off is that you're just not going to make the amount of money. You're not going to make what your brain would be worth, say, if you decided to go into an investment bank or a private equity firm or whatever options there would be out there in the marketplace. And that's the trade-off. And that's the trade-off I thought I was going into. And a lot of people who went in around the time that I did thought. But that was just like no longer true. Like, it was bad, but you could still buy into that lie when I signed up for my Ph.D. Program. And I think at this stage, that lie is just totally untenable. And in fact, the way that academia actually is, with few exceptions, there are some older sort of tenured people who are very good, but with few exceptions now, academia really self-selects for the absolute worst type of person. Because if you wanted to quote unquote sell out and just make a lot of money, academia is not the right place to do it. Go to a bank, do something else. You're going to be making a lot more money if you just wanted that. But if you want to be a purist and you care about ideas as such, and you want to be that eccentric, just exploring really interesting but impractical ideas, academia is absolutely not the place for that. And so what the person who thrives in academia is this really kind of this special type of pseudo ambitious mediocrity that didn't want to play the status game, didn't want the rat race in New York or something like that, and didn't want to strike out some kind of independent purist agenda. And so it's really hard to describe beyond that, but the type of creature that academia now self-selects for is profoundly depressing and has nothing to do with the original type of trade-off that I thought and that academia should be. It's not a place that tolerates smart, interesting eccentrics who want to study impractical ideas.
But so here's the question: is for those people who have are well studied in philosophy and Western thought, and there's just so much, right? Where in Russia, and somebody commented here about Russia, and then China. Everyone knows I have a great familiarity with China. Mm-hmm. They don't despise, even with their kind of Confucian. I don't want to get into it too much, but they don't despise Western philosophy or Western thought. They just
respect it. They respect it.
Yeah, they just try and cherry pick what the diaspora is allowed to bring back in.
Right.
And there's some human rights issues. But so, Dugin came over here and he did something with Dugin did something with Jack Murphy. Did you hear that interview? It's amazing.
Interesting.
It's amazing. It's honestly amazing. It's really, really incredible. But now, can't some of our academics that are kind of can't they now kind of start moving to homes that are receptive to them? Now, Dugin is receptive, he's very respected in Russia, obviously. But can't some of our academics that can't get a job here and are being excluded, it's kind of the politics of exclusion, do you think we're going to have a brain drain where those people now really have to go, like a forced migration for those people to
go? Again, look, there needs to be receptivity on the other side. Taboo arbitrage requires multiple parties who understand how to facilitate it, and that's why I would think, I would hope that countries like Russia, countries like China, would really take advantage of this and really set up endowed chairs in order to give a perch to, not just people who are mediocrities, but people who actually have research potential, people who could be very interesting, who simply, because of the ideological orthodoxy of the American regime, the globalist American empire, are unable to develop and thrive within the context of the United States and academia in the West, could be given a place to do so in Russia and China, maybe in Singapore, and other options. And so I would hope that these other countries would be perceptive enough to understand why that would be in their interests as well to do this. And so again, I think this is such new terrain that this might take a decade to develop, but I think it does have potential, and it's one of the few places that I think there might be unexpected opportunities.
And I won't be able to bring the comment on, but I'm looking at the Twitter comments because they're coming in from so many different places. Yup, it's me. And thank you so much for joining us. And apologies that I'm not including your comment on this, but it's very interesting. Says taboo arbitrage was done a bit by the USSR with Patrice Lumumba University. And then they add, though that was a murky basis, but that is interesting. But now I guess is more of an opportunity because people can migrate and they've got the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, it's amazing. You're a Bitcoiner, but that's not a Bitcoiner. You really are. And we're going to start closing up, but I see some interesting questions, and then we're going to close up. So Rail Fanning Points says, let's quit beating around the bush. GAE wants to systematically mass murder the plebs. And so I can frame that in a kind of a friendlier way, I guess. Just from, again, all of history. And I can't say that all of history, but enough of it that there is kind of this real violence now that the elites are willing to employ, and a real cruelty that they didn't even have before. So I guess their response to kind of the Trump election was, we know we're being threatened. We know we're being in jeopardy, and we're just going to go out on an all-out war against these people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, now you respond to that. I just did my little soliloquy. Real Fanning Points says, let's go around the bush. GAE wants to systematically mass murder the plebs.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't formulate it precisely in such stark terms, but you see the trends developing. You see that the national security state has effectively identified at least half of the country as suspected domestic terrorists. They're inviting the full weight of our national security apparatus to crush those people. They're cleansing the defense sector itself of anyone who might harbor those sympathies, which would be a precondition to this broader cleansing. And again, as we talked about with the whiteness thing, the globalist American empire, the American regime, through all of its dominant institutions, has normalized quasi-genocidal language, racially charged language about whiteness. And so I think we're starting to move into a situation with eerie hints of, there's, I'm not going to say Rwanda exactly, but there are hints of that certainly in our language and how things are developing and what kind of language is normalized about generally people who oppose this kind of woke ideological regime we've come, and specifically with regard to whiteness. So very disturbing, but that's what we're in.
I pressed mute. So we're going to get on to the last questions. And I said that an hour ago. Right? So here, right, I'm going to find the last questions, but they're so good. So we're gonna go into like a speed round, right? You've done that before, right? We've done the speed round. In Periscope 1, we did it. In Periscope 2, we did a little bit. In Periscope 3, we didn't do it at all. We just went on. It was so much fun. So Noodles, for you, thank you so much for joining us. Says, and this is something that you and Jack Posobiec have discussed a lot. You guys have a good understanding of whatever it's called, Nord Stream. Can you just tell me exactly what's happening with that from the way you see it?
I think that, I mean, that's a longer discussion, but basically there is a sector of our national security apparatus, you can call them Atlanticists and whatnot, and they are particularly obsessed with dominance over Europe. And that is what this whole game is with Ukraine. That's what this new pipeline is about, called Nord Stream 2. The Germans love it. A lot of European countries love it. Our deep state, or this Atlanticist faction of the deep state, doesn't love it because it gives Russia more leverage geopolitically into Europe, which we don't like. And that's sort of the short version. And so Biden, being kind of having a dysfunctional regime and no order or hierarchy, like the deep state is in control, but there are various factions of the deep state with different priorities. And the problem with there being no like real order or authority within the whole subterranean structure of the Biden regime is that you have all of these factions of the deep state kind of getting what they want, but in a way that is most likely to fail and end up to blow back in a counterproductive fashion. And so you see inklings of this neo-Cold War with China. You see heightened tensions with Russia, and you even see some lip service to this idea of unfinished business with Assad. And in all three dimensions, like a serious nation that had a real geopolitical strategy, had a real grand strategy, would prioritize and make decisions deliberately based on trade-offs. Well, maybe China is the bigger threat and we shouldn't antagonize Russia and so forth. But what we have is effectively this lack of prioritization. And as a result, we're going after China, we're going after Russia, we're going after Iran to some degree, and they'll all fail, they'll all backfire. And that, in a nutshell, is what we can expect from Biden.
I did a Periscope with Leyland Miller as part of the Investor Series. I did one with Investor Series 7 and another one which was Investor Series 12. I've ended the Investor Series. We did a good job, right? Was I right? But so the interesting thing is Leyland was discussing the Green New Deal. And I didn't realize how much the Green New Deal relies on Chinese labor, Chinese parts, Chinese manufacturing. It's a green Chinese New Deal. And I don't want to get it too much into it in this Periscope, but I know I've tweeted out some clips of it. It's really interesting how much it's helpful to the Chinese Communist Party. There's a couple of questions, and I do want to include this because I think it's so important. So insert name here says the modern VA issues psychological diagnosis and accompanying meds like crazy. I'm not exaggerating. That's not good. That's not good. So we're gonna look. I just see it. Last questions, Darren. Who should have washed your feet last week?
Well, as a matter of fact, there's a new addition to the not the peanut gallery, but what I call the peasant gallery, the cognitive peasant gallery. And it's someone who's not even worth mentioning. He's one of these types, as I mentioned, the kind of person who's now self-selected in academia. He's very bizarre. His academic specialty, he learned ancient Greek, albeit poorly, in order to do academic research on basically the sexuality of animals. So that gives you some idea of what kind of guy this is. And so, yeah, his name is, I don't even want to say his name. His first name is Stefan, and I'm considering whether he's worthy to scrub my feet. But maybe he can just clean my floor instead.
You should put out a calendar. I would buy that calendar. Do it for a revolver and figure out some way that we can have like who should scrub your feet.
I mean, but it's really sad because this guy, Stefan.
No, I'm telling you, hold on, stop. I'm the business guy, right? I'm the business guy, right? Extreme salesman. I'm telling you, come out with a calendar that has every week who should scrub your feet. Everybody would buy it. I'm telling you, everybody would buy it. So here's and it's just such an interesting question. Then we got to go. So here's an interesting question. Streamlined will. And Darren, I'm not asking you kind of. I'm asking you as the curator, right? Because you're seeing things in a different way. Because you're seeing news from every type of source. Says Streamlined Will says, what do you expect to be the result of the Floyd trial? Bigger riots than before if acquitted. Darren, what are you seeing with that?
Yeah, I see big riots on the horizon. Although there's a new dimension, and that is that Biden's in charge. So will they allow the riots to get out of hand? That's sort of the complicating qualifying issue there. But I do think there will be riots of some sort.
We're going to close
irrespective of the outcome, by the way.
Yeah. It's such a bad thing. I'm going to be doing a Periscope soon with the borough president of Queens, and I'm very excited about that. He's such a wonderful person, and there's just people need dialogue, and he is just so incredible, and I'm very excited about it. Queens is literally the United Nations, and I think it's got the most, and I live in the most diverse community in the world. I love it. It's amazing, much better than Manhattan. So Nancy and I got out of Manhattan because it was hard. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, thank you so much for joining us. And I like the image. I think I like the image. I can't really see it. Is that like, now I see it. I like the image. So Obi-Wan Kenobi says, I go to Revolver, the National Pulse, and Populist Press. Darren, what are you regularly reading?
You know, I try to survey a wide range of things. I get a lot from Twitter. Also a fan of National Pulse, Populist Press, and so forth. I read, conventional news outlets too. A lot of stuff we aggregate from the New York Times, from, Wall Street Journal. I read, try to follow tech stuff, the latest stuff on tech censorship. My friend and excellent reporter, Alan Makari, on Breitbart, I follow his stuff. So I try to keep it fairly eclectic, including a lot of just kind of establishment mainstream outlets, but kind of keeping an eye on how they report it, reading it not on a first order basis or, oh, this is what's happening, but it's useful to know how they choose to present the narrative at that moment and kind of incorporate that into the way that Revolver would present it.
And I see the last question is, but so Tom Trotz, and I like that flag. Oh, flag is very important to me. Says, great site, great layout, great content. Keep up the good work. They are signed up, and I want to include this from Peter, who this statue is driving them crazy. They appreciate the statue, of course, but because it's crooked like that, right? And it's driving Nancy crazy also. I don't know. I'll fix it right after this, right? But I appreciate that. And Peter also says intermittent fasting. I wrote a book on it. I'm intermittent fasting today. I've had too many carbohydrates. I'm literally doing it today, except for the M&Ms. So Blake Hyman says, I am becoming a Revolver reader. I've been pushing the news away for so long. I have to rewire my brain. You've got to rewire your brain. I learned, and so did Nancy, from John V. Harrison and listening to her devotional music and a Maha Mantra, that sound also rewires the brain. It carves in like new grooves into it. You've got to be very careful what you let in. The news that you let into your head is the same thing. Be really careful. Whatever you let in, it's there and it's going to bounce around for the rest of your life. So Blake Hyman says, I'm becoming a Revolver reader. I've been pushing the news away for so long. I have to rewire my brain. Darren?
That's great. That's great. And read everything judiciously, including Revolver, everything you read. And again, there is a hygiene of the mind that one has to cultivate. And I like to think that, you know, the material and content on Revolver will keep you informed and also keep you entertained. So I'm grateful that you look at Revolver, and I hope your neural circuitry will rewire in a fashion that's advantageous to you.
And I want to close up with something very unique, and hopefully everybody will be responsive to it afterwards, because look at this, right? Interesting, very interesting, very interesting. The first brother got it much better than the second brother, though, right? What I'd like to close up, and this is a little bit of a surprise for you also, Darren, but because so many people joined us afterwards, and also because we're warmed up now, right? Let me just turn off this comment. We began this, and for those who weren't here at the time, we began this with a discussion of a big story that Revolver has today, and Darren introduced himself then, right? And he also had a chance to discuss the story. So he introduced himself, he introduced Revolver, and then he introduced the story and why it's important. And I'd like to close up with that again. And if people are going to look for that clip, because I think it's so important, people said that they like things in an audible form. So I'm going to give Darren all of that. And I'm sure he'd be happy to slice some of these clips, but particularly this one. I think this one's very important. So I'm going to be going away. Sergeant Hoyle, thank you so much for being there. Would Revolver think of having a locals page?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't think it's right for Revolver. I think Revolver is Breedbird today. It really is. And it's just a different business model, right? It's just a different business model. His business model wouldn't have been able to exist now. The challenges are much different. The antagonism is much different. Kind of the extortion racket of the industrial activist complex. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going away. And I want to thank everybody for being here. But Darren's going to stay with you for about 3 minutes. Maybe I'll reappear then. Darren, would you be kind enough to do a quick reintroduction of yourself, and an introduction of Revolver, and then also an introduction of, and a quick discussion, a 2-minute discussion of the story that came out. And I'd like to remind everybody as I go away, I'm going to come back a little bit just to close it up. I guess I got to, but I'm going to remind everybody, please do subscribe to Revolver. We have to support the startup. And whether it's a person on a diet, I gave everyone my own experience. People supported me. I support people who are on a diet, right? We're very cautious with what we say with them. But in people who are writing books, I support them seeing movies, children's clothing, whatever it is. I think it's important, particularly in the case of Revolver, where there's a real scarcity, right? So it's like we're trying to keep an extinct species alive so we can kind of have them repopulate. Write that down, Darren. I like that. You like that, right? It's interesting, right? Okay, so Darren, would you be kind enough to do that? Is that too much of an imposition?
All right, I'll go on for a minute because I can't rehearse the whole thing before. I'll do a minute and I'll just sign off.
Okay, so actually do the introduction to yourself, because I think that's important, because it's going to be part of this clip for Revolver, and I think everybody can appreciate that. Do a quick introduction of yourself, do a quick introduction of Revolver, and do a quick discussion of the story. Should take no longer than 4 minutes to do the entire thing. And I'll come back on, and then we'll all sign off. Darren, you got 4 minutes. I'm happy.
I'm gonna take maybe 2 minutes, because we've done this already. But for those of you who haven't seen the beginning of this stream, I'm Darren Beattie, and formerly of the Trump White House, former academic, professor at Duke. Now I'm with Revolver, trying to make it a thing, and it's already been very big, already shaped the narrative in the country along a number of dimensions. Very proud of that. And so I'm just here to talk about the latest story in Revolver, revolver.news that is, and that is titled, "The Deep State Just Made Its Declaration of War Against MAGA Official." And you can go to revolver.news, read the whole thing. I've already gone through it in some depth earlier on in this stream, so suffice it to say here, a bunch of former national security officials got together to effectively declare war on any American who objects to this open-air prison-like dystopia that our country has become. And that's part of a really disturbing trend that I like to talk about, that revolver.news covers, and that is that our national security apparatus has been repurposed and redeployed domestically against us, the American people. And if you look at the names, if you look at the actual signatories to this disgusting letter, it adds severe insult to this devastating injury. The names really speak for themselves. A rogues gallery of commissars, the Praetorian Guard of the globalist American empire, war criminals, liars, James Clapper, Michael McFowle, Michael Hayden. It goes on. If you want to know the dirty details of these people who've declared war on you, and if you want to know more about the broader context of this war on the American people by the national security apparatus and much more, go to revolver.news, get informed. Please tell your friends about it as well. So with that, I'll sign off for the evening.
Darren and everybody, I want to thank everybody so much. This was a lot of fun. I'm very interested in people's comments. I always ask for them. This time in particular, I'm very interested in people's comments. So please do reply within the tweets and let me know. This is going to be on Revolver, so you're not going to really see me repeating this one too much on my timeline because I want to steer everything now towards Revolver, and hopefully they can turn it into like an audio thing, right?
Yep.
So people can kind of podcast, enjoy it. Everybody's been great. So much thank you, everybody. And I see Mustang, so I've got to particularly say goodbye to Mustang. Mustang is awesome. So thank you so much. And Darren, stay with me. I'm going to press the button. Thank you, everybody, so much for allowing Darren and I to be on your feed. We expected this to be 20 minutes. I always say that, right? Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your time. Bye. Hold on. Didn't press it. Now.